On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Bill Press. He's the Senior VP of Engineering at Iterable. We're going to be talking about a few different things. Mainly, we're going to be focused on product velocity and the drivers at early stage startups. We're going to be talking about how external pressures drive growth. And we're going to talk about what Bill finds important in terms of finding his next job. And I think he has great insights on that topic as well. Bill, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Amir. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. So I guess two things to start off. One is if you could tell us what Iterable does, and then also, what are your roles and responsibilities as the Senior VP of Engineering?
Iterable is a cross-channel marketing platform, and it provides a unified customer experience across channels and provides analytics to make it easier for our customers to understand what their users are doing.
Awesome. And what, in terms of being the SVP of Engineering, what do your responsibilities look like?
Right, that's a great question. So I'm responsible for the engineering team as a whole, both the management team and the individual contributors that report to them. What I'm not responsible for is product management. So we have a separate product management organization, but my responsibilities do include both software developers and site reliability engineering.
Awesome. So I guess just to frame the conversation, in terms of the current team, maybe you could just talk about how it's currently set up and how you guys manage teams, as an overarching view of, the internal workings.
Sure. So at Iterable, we have two main areas for engineering. We have the product engineering group and we have platform engineering. Product engineering has a lot of the product development teams, and the platform engineering has teams that are more devoted to high-scale infrastructure and site reliability.
And I'm assuming you guys are some form of Agile, Scrum, something like that?
That's right. We use both Scrum and Kanban. We don't dictate the process across the organization for every team. We do expect clear Agile methodology for any given team, and we align the boundaries between periods of work, but we have some teams that are pulling tickets off of a Kanban board and some teams that are working in 2-week sprints.
The topics about balancing team velocity and obviously, with appropriate levels of quality. I guess my first question would be is if there isn't like a defined overarching methodology everyone's adhering to, how do you guys, level set expectations across different teams, across different methodologies or different ways of accounting for work?
So actually, I'm going to make a distinction between how we plan and execute and how we make decisions about quality versus product velocity, because I think those are separable questions. When I think about product velocity and delivering with quality, the evolution that I normally see in small technology companies as they mature is that at first, a startup will be really all about product velocity and trying to gain as much traction and market penetration as they possibly can, as quickly as they can, with sufficient quality. Sufficient can be, for very early companies, a fairly low bar. So it's basically just what do we need to get by so that we can keep growing the business as fast as we can. And this is a time when a lot of companies develop what I call strategic debt. So they're acquiring technical debt. It's not because they're lazy. It's because they're making a strategic trade-off between having rigorous, robust 5 nines, a system as they can, versus enough customers that they can keep the business afloat. You can have an incredibly reliable platform as a small startup without sufficient customers, and you won't succeed as a business. Obviously, if you can't earn your customers' trust, then you're also not going to succeed at a business. But in the very early days, it's very common to see that trade-off lean towards product velocity. There's usually not a lot of process involved and even maybe decisions about it, because everybody's moving so fast and they know that the next product is needed. And then as the team starts to mature, the company starts to mature, then that starts going from a small group that is in touch with the founders and in touch with the need to continue to grow the market to a sales team that can sometimes drive the engineering team to deliver a product because they're agreeing to things before they're built. So that's another way that as a company starts to mature, I've seen product velocity basically get ahead of the need to build in quality. But especially in enterprise SaaS, which is my area, as you start to move up market, which is kind of inevitable, you're going to have to be prioritizing customer trust more and more. And again, you will often see engineering organizations mature because of external pressures. Okay. So initially, it's external pressures to grow as fast as possible, both from the founding team and then from a sales team, and then external pressures from the customer success team trying to support customers that are larger than really the company's ready to support. So the company's moved up market, or they're trying to move up market. Hey, we closed our first big customer, and then we're not providing the level of customer trust we need to. So now customer success is you need to prioritize reliability. So again, you have these external pressures that are coming in as competing pressures. That's very natural. It's very normal. It's not where you want to end up. Where you want to end up is internalizing the need to both support the business and support your customers and ensure that they can trust your platform, and have that drive come from within engineering. And that's something that happens only after usually a company's matured to a certain point. If you get a very experienced leader in early, then it might look different, and you might get that internalized drive for both velocity and quality early on. But honestly, it doesn't often work out that way. And so when a new leader comes in midway through a company's evolution, as a private company, they're having to take these external pressures and internalize them. So now that it's internalized into a team, it often takes the form of, instead of coming from sales, it's moving through product management. It's still kind of an external pressure, but they're a very close partner. And then you also have started to develop a quality team or a site reliability team that's going to internalize this drive towards reliability. So again, the pressures are still a bit isolated in that you can describe them as coming from different functions, but they're closer to core engineering. What I see happen there is product managers will drive for product velocity. And if you have a fairly junior team, which often happens if you're growing your team very quickly, they may not have the maturity to push back against product management pressure. And so I have found that product development teams at this stage will want to deliver with more quality. They've internalized the pressure they've gotten from these larger customers from customer success, but they're not yet mature enough in terms of where they are in their engineering career that they feel like they withstand the pressure of their PM pushing for more features. And that's where engineering management comes in to help support engineers, have them know what it means to be fully responsible for what they're developing and the quality of the product that they're shipping, and create a more healthy dialogue and tension within the team between these roles to really have the team as a whole start to have a deeper understanding of the need to move fast and the need to deliver customer trust. I would say that's a good place for a maturing, say, mid-stage enterprise SaaS company that's mid-stage pre-IPO, like startup. And then the next area of evolution is to formalize the balance of quality and velocity in some kind of structure. And the one that I'm really drawn to is having site reliability indicators and objectives, and actually being able to talk about error budgets and how much error a given service can withstand before you need to invest in reliability because you're going to breach the site reliability objectives that you've set. And if the product managers are involved in setting those objectives, then it's something objective that everybody on the team can look at to say, we need to invest more in reliability, or we've got tons of room in our error budget. We absolutely should be accelerating the amount of features that we're developing.
That's awesome. And I think to kind of step back, I know we want to talk a little bit about the team level, but to stay at this level, actually, I am curious, when you stepped into Iterable, it's been a year and change, and I know you people can look at your LinkedIn, but you come from some larger organizations as well. When you come into that startup environment and you're trying to, survey the land, and you're trying to understand this balance between the sales-driven growth, the product management, driven growth, how did you start observing that? Or was it already kind of fleshing out, and was it already kind of maturing before you even got there?
That's a great question. It was already maturing before I got there. And I have to say, part of the reason why I chose Iterable is it has an amazing culture. It has an incredible culture. The level of communication and trust within the teams and across functions and across the leadership is really, it's not something that I've seen at this level before. So they've already been having really great conversations about, are we making the right trade-offs with sales pressure? Are we providing the level of trust that our customers need? What's product management's role in themselves being able to both, as normally, drive for product velocity, but also advocate for investments in reliability to improve customer trust?
Actually, to take a step back about that, the culture, because I think a lot of times people talk about, communications and there's the right type of culture. I joined for that. Sorry, we're going to take a complete divergent question.
No,
here,
I love this. This is great.
When you were interviewing, and obviously you've held roles at great companies, what were you looking for to determine that before you started, right? Because it's different once you're there and you're like, well, I can see the culture, but through the interview process, you have a couple of hours, a half a day, and at this point, I think did you join pre-pandemic or during the? Actually, you were on the cusp of pandemic. So
yes,
how did you start understanding what you valued in the culture so that it'd be the right fit for you?
When I was looking, I started looking in January of 2020, and I interviewed at a lot of places. I interviewed at really small startups. I was talking with very large public companies, and I talked with, mid to late stage pre-IPO. So I talked with companies all across the board, different kinds of roles. And I took a number of months for the process, as I did last time I looked, actually. And when I went from Salesforce Optimizely, I took about half a year. So I like to take a long time when I'm looking for my next role. I want to make sure it fits. And what I looked for was three things. Number one, I was looking for a company with an incredible culture. And by incredible culture, I mean a company that is kind more than nice and has woven within it a deep sense of compassion and humanity. And that really it's got heart and that it respects that building software is a human endeavor. That to me was singly the most important thing. And it's really hard to assess that in like a 6-hour interview panel. But I will say I didn't do that. Like I talked with many people over the course of a number of months. I actually had first talked with Iterable fairly early on in my search and had continued to talk with them throughout my search. And ultimately, the number one reason why I chose Iterable because they had absolutely hands down an incredible culture and one that was really both very driven to create a strong, thriving business that provides high value to every single customer and a trusted experience, and also valuing the people that are making that happen. Numbers 2 and 3 are still important, and they were part of my decision-making. Number 2 was I wanted to join a strong business. I wanted to join a business that was growing fast. And Iterable is a very successful business. They're doing really well, and they were back when I joined. And number 3 was I needed to believe that the executive team was seasoned and talented enough to go the distance. And by go the distance, I don't mean just taking the company public, but having it thrive as a public company. But number 1 was culture. I could actually talk all day about culture.
Awesome. I think that was a great explanation in terms of, what you were looking for in your, next job. I think it's super important for people to have a clear understanding of those indicators and to actually be looking for them. And to kind of go back to what you were talking about, I guess, earlier about, external pressures driving growth and shifting from a sales-driven growth to product management-driven growth. I guess talk about engineering's involvement in that partnership with product management as the PM functionality starts maturing within a growing, thriving organization.
Well, I think engineering's role with product management is one of partnership. And one way that engineering supports product management is basically supporting the creation of process that controls how requests come into engineering. Early on, sales is going to be going directly to engineering to make requests or to say, we've already sold this, so please build it. And the role of product management is to understand what customers really need, not necessarily what they're asking sales for, and to prioritize those. And that's really hard to do if they're going directly to engineering. So one way that engineering can support product management as they mature in an organization is to partner with them on creating processes that funnel requests away from engineering into product management. And that can include requests from like a board that captures requests from sales, and they can even say, here's the amount of ARR that's attached to these feature requests. Requests coming from customer success, where customer success can get together and prioritize what they want to ask of product management. Again, they can attach customers to that and ARR. But all of it is done in the spirit of partnering with product management. And I can't emphasize that enough. It's really common in organizations to find even an adversarial relationship between engineering and product management. Honestly, I don't think that serves the organization and doesn't serve the customers. There's a certain amount of healthy tension that's naturally going to evolve. You want product management to have a strong opinion about what to build, and that feature development is important. And you want engineering to have clarity about what's needed for reliability and customer trust. Tensions will naturally arise there, but it all should arise within this container of partnership.
And I guess the strategic debt you spoke about early on, and that's a necessary trade-off that companies need to make. When do you feel a company should go back and revisit that? Should they? I mean, if things are working and growing and scaling, I mean, obviously we have stories of companies that have run into massive issues because of early on strategic debt. But when would you revisit that?
I'm smiling because that's such a delightful and loaded question. I've worked at large companies, not to be named, that never did. Or when they tried to address it, it was too late. And so they just kind of lived with it. And I've seen that they've been able to be successful. And also it can have a really negative impact on engineering morale. And that's expensive because people are less efficient, they're less effective, they attrit, you have to rehire. That all represents great cost to the company. But you also can't just do it when you're a young startup. Like I said, you have to take on certain debt strategically. So when do you handle it? I would say there's no right answer at just the right time. It's easy for it to be too late at some point. And obviously you can't do it too early because you'll slow down. So it's a judgment call. And Iterable is taking on that debt. And they started paying it down before I got there. And we're doing it through strategically selected projects that have fairly high scope because we're solving problems in a fundamental way. We don't do none, and we're not trying to boil the ocean. It's really taking them on as intelligently as we can. And I always like to have at least one major strategic debt pay down in flight at any given time. And then, of course, we're always paying down smaller pieces. And I've also at times asked for separate funding to work on a project to pay down, and that works as well. I've seen that work at a number of companies where you are doing your normal product development, a large strategic project of paying down some debt, as well as all the little pieces you have to do to make sure that you maintain reliability across the organization, but also go to the executive team with specific funding requests for another long-term initiative. That works as well.
And it's hard because the old adage of if it's not broken, and it's hard if the company's growing, it's making money. It's like, do you divert resources? And I think the strategic part that's interesting because I think then you're trying to attach an ROI of efficiency, or you're trying to establish some return on that investment.
That's right. In the example that I talked about earlier, where a very successful company that didn't pay down some of that debt, like I said, you will see engineers working in a certain part of the code base will have low morale and low productivity. There, the signal is very loud, very clear, happening all the time, and very difficult to remediate. And you can trace that back, right? Like at some point, it's not so loud. And at some point before that, you just have the inklings of it that you can sense in the organization that something is coming. And before that, you don't have a signal, but you might have very experienced or mature engineers who are looking at part of the code base or part of the architecture or the infrastructure and saying, this will be a problem down the road. So ideally, you're going as far to the left as possible in the timeline where you can identify before it even becomes a problem. Here's the list of projects that we're going to have to take on. This is the time to start prioritizing and executing on the first one. But yeah, it all comes down to being able to sense the signals. And some of that may come before you get any feedback because you have somebody with that capability on your team, or it just requires a leader to be sensitive to how people are spending their time and what they're saying to each other.
And it's amazing as technology is so, structured and well organized. It's the art side, the people management side that actually, in this case that we're talking about, being able to understand your team, their morale, their productivity, understanding those signals. I mean, that takes a good people manager. Otherwise, I mean, you could be driving off a cliff, and by the time you notice it, you're at the bottom.
Yeah, I've always loved the paradox that, engineering, we're ultimately doing work that comes down to zeros and ones. It's very concrete and literal, but the creation of this work is very complex, unbounded, and human. And the management of it requires high EQ if you're going to do it well. As opposed to sales, where it's all about relationships, and closing the deal is very soft and about like making connections and understanding people. And so the work itself is sort of in that very like emotional, human, relational realm. But the management of it is numeric, right? It's the exact opposite. It's very like, did you make your quota? How many people on the team have attained their quota? Like, what's the production on average of your AEs? Like, how many more do you have to hire in order to get to this number? It's math. Mm-hmm. It's interesting to me, the difference. And it always, I think, leads to some misunderstandings on each side when they try to understand each other's organizations about what's needed.
Absolutely. Awesome. Bill, I think we could probably dive into several of the topics, and maybe we'll have you back on to kind of focus on another aspect of engineering management. So thank you for being on. If somebody does want to reach out to you to pick your brain on anything you talked about, is LinkedIn a good avenue? Do you have a preferred way?
Yeah, LinkedIn's perfect. LinkedIn's perfect. And okay. It's linkedin.com in Bill Press.
All right, there we go. We'll make sure that's in the show notes, but thank you for being on. That's it for this episode. We'll be back again with a different guest, different topic. Until then, I ask for two things. One, if you find the podcast useful, share it. That's how it's been growing. So it's been fantastic. Thank you for those that are sharing the podcast. And secondly, if you want me to talk about a specific topic, reach out on LinkedIn, let me know, and I'll try to find a guest the best I can. Until next time, thank you.